what's going to happen to the workforce of people entering the workforce?
So I did a keynote speech about this a few times last year, and I hate talking about the future, to be honest with you, but we have to a little bit when we talk about AI. I expect it's going to be quite differentiated, actually, because if you look at the data, I did it for that speech I did. So if you look at the data of robotics, right, because we do know things, right? So we've spent 30 years around the world, especially in the global north, the west, deploying robotics, right? And then you can actually track. So from the US, for example, you can see the impact on wages, the impact on unemployment, and so on of deploying robotics at a massive scale, kind of in the background. So most of us don't see it, but it happened at a huge scale over a 25-year period. And it has wiped out manufacturing jobs. And then you can see, and wages are actually lower as well. So, which means I think there's a good bit of evidence that in the real world over a 2.5 decade period, if you do a lot of replacement with robotics or of some kind of automation, then it does have a real impact. So I think there's going to be huge change in some areas. But when I look at the technology on the other side, and you look at if you look at, there's a lot of scientists in the world, like data scientists and AI scientists, who do comparative meta studies across all of the AIs, like Grok, all the ones you mentioned, right? OpenAI, DeepSeek, etc. And they plot how good they are against various benchmarks. Then all of them are plateauing, including plateauing on the reasoning front, right? Like now, the amount of money that's being spent is already getting to diminishing returns. There's less of a difference between the newest models, and the previous. So go 2 steps back and there was a bigger difference. So the difference of model capability on reasoning. So the graph goes like this, and they're all clustering up at the top. And I saw the same thing, as I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation, with speech to text years ago, speech transcription, right? It was going up really fast and then it plateaued as well. And I don't know of any technology that doesn't have that curve. So unless some new AI capability comes along, I'm pretty sure that the plateau, diminishing returns will go along for a little while. We'll still see amazing things. There'll be a lot of mic drops and so on for the next few years. But overall, I think the scientific data shows that it's plateauing. And then I think when it plateaus, and we've seen this now, right? The minute it began plateauing, there was tons of companies. There was 10 new investments competing with OpenAI because everybody realized, hey, it's plateauing soon, which means that if we jump in now, we're likely to be able to take a big chunk of the market. But if we wait 2 years, we won't be able to, right? And that's a really strong indicator when the market moves that way. So I think it's getting more fragmented and more commoditized. And this means that, despite the disruption that happens from the mass automation, there's also going to be a whole load of jobs, which is AI that only works if humans are clever with it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's going to be so huge. Can you I know a lot of scientists in Berlin not working in software who produce new algae. That may be the future of taking carbon out of the air, for example. Or, and right, loads of them. All of those people in almost every one of those areas, they'll be using AI soon enough, if they're not using it already, to pick their candidate enzyme or their, right? And I think that's going to affect mid-level jobs as well, actually, right? So I think people will be working differently, but I have my doubts that it'll be as bad, as bad as one side says, or as good as the other side says. I think, I know that's boring, but I actually do think we land in the middle, but it will be painful. It will be painful for some parts of the population. There's no doubt about that, because the previous robotics wave was as well. So I think both things are there, and both things are true at the same time, basically. How fast we can adjust is probably is going to be the issue, right? And I think that's going to be, we're kind of good at adjusting. We're also bad at adjusting. So
depends who you ask to adapt. Right.